Hello, good evening, and welcome to another 8 p.m. Podcast. So, first of all, hope this one finds you all keeping well. And I can see, I can see Jed, formerly of this parish, has returned. Let me, similarly, with a flick of a button, bring you Rebecca Butler. Good evening, Rebecca.
Good evening, and Jed, I've just sent you a message. Congratulations, you made it first tonight. Well done. First, second, third, in fact, on the live stream. Well done. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, there's nothing like enthusiasm. So listen, folks, thank you as you join your numbers. Appreciate that. Can I, as ever, ask you to do the normal routine? First of all, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Got to make sure you subscribe, hit the bell. Secondly, make sure you follow Alt News Media on Facebook. Make sure you follow Rebecca on Twitter, that other place from which some of us are, of course, naturally banned. And yes, if you do those things, then you'll all be very good. And we'll probably just kick off now, because Rebecca, it's been they say a week is a long time in politics, but my goodness, even a couple of days is a long time in this whole coronavirus heavy environment in which we live. So I think the viewers and the people who watch this in repeat will be very interested to hear your take on it. What I'd like us to talk about is basically the stuff that's been happening today with Boris and the three tiers and all of that business. In fact, actually, as we speak right now tonight, the Northern Ireland executive is meeting, the mighty executive is meeting to discuss a 4-week circuit breaker of some type, which there's disharmony apparently amongst the parties, but I think the intent is to shut us down as well. So that's all ongoing. So I want to talk about that. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was the whole issue of young Darren Grimes, who is the young chap from the northeast of England, a real good Geordie lad who the Metropolitan Police apparently are pursuing potentially for some kind of bizarre hate crime over an interview he conducted with Professor David Starkey. And given your connections with the Free Speech Union and I think general interest in free speech, I think that's a good one to talk about as well. So, hang on a second. Now, if there's any trolls on, I see a troll alert. Or should I have been given up a troll alert, Chris Davis? I'm not sure. If there's any trolls, let me know. And the trolls will be removed. I don't see any trolls. So I think everybody's fine. So, Rebecca, first of all, I wanted to put up a slide. I've got lots of slides tonight. I wanted to put this up, and then we're going to dive in, okay? But I just wanted to share this. I shared this last night. And I'm going to put it up now, so it might cover up my face, hopefully not yours. But anyway, here you go. So a bit of both. Just wanted to put this one up. Rebecca, there you can see UK cases mortality pretty much up to date, give or take a week. And you can see here the blue is the number of cases, and the red is sadly the number of deaths. I think you can just about make out the deaths here. But there you go. That's the picture in terms of mortality over COVID-19. And Boris came to the Commons yesterday afternoon and he addressed the nation at 7 p.m. last night, Rebecca, 7 p.m. to inform us that basically, we've got a strange patchwork. He announced this, didn't he? So this is the map of England, where you are located. I know I can see where you are, Rebecca, down in tier 1 medium risk. We've got high risk, which is significant chunks of the north. And then I think we have Merseyside, Liverpool in very, very high risk. So, Rebecca, what do you make of it all?
Well, can you put the first slide back on?
Your wish is my command.
Yeah, so what's really important with this slide is to recognize one very, very significant thing. And that is that if we'd had the same testing capacity back in February that we do now, that first wave of viral infection would have been 5 times the height of that curve there. Okay, so it's simply the case we were not testing in the community back at that period. So now we are testing in the community. We're seeing more cases. A lot of these cases are repeat cases, and a lot of them are asymptomatic cases. So really, the case numbers are not the best metric on which to decide what the lethality, the fatality rate of this infection is. It does put 15% in hospital, and as yet, as far as I'm aware, GPs are not prescribing any first-line medication. So you still, if you are going to get any medication at all for COVID, you still have to go into hospital to be admitted. If you end up in ITU, you will get dexamethasone. That's an anti-inflammatory, a steroid, which Donald Trump had, by the way. And then to get the monoclonal antibodies like Regeneron or remdesivir, the antiviral agent that they used in Ebola, to get those again, you have to have a very severe form of the illness. As yet, there is no distinct cure for the virus.
Yep.
Which doesn't come as a shock really to many people, because we know that viruses are essentially untreatable. So very easy to say there are no deaths, we don't need to worry, and why is all the drama happening? But, you know, I would stress to people that just take a deep breath and think this one through. People like Chris Whitty, Professor Van Tam, and Vance, just to name 3, straight off the top of my head, these people have an alphabet of qualifications after their names. These people are highly professional, highly trained scientists. Even Neil Ferguson, very, very clever people. And they're advising ministers who've got a Bachelor of Arts, usually from Oxford. You know, they're advising people who cannot critically evaluate the information they've been given.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, will we ever criticize our government for doing too much? And I don't think we will. I don't think, for example, the Nightingale hospitals, you should ever criticize the government for having that capacity. Now, I think that there is a second spurt. I don't believe it's a second wave. I think this is still the first wave of the epidemic, which is moving its way up the country. Same across Europe, no different. Germany is struggling right now, really badly. I think we should be very slow to criticize, because the government is well advised. There is no greater conspiracy here. This is the last thing Boris Johnson would have wanted in the early days of his premiership. It's the worst thing for Emmanuel Macron. It's the worst thing for Donald Trump. It's the worst thing for Angela Merkel. Right. You know, none of them has got political capital out of this. And I know, I spoke to my daughter this morning, the COVID wards in Sheffield are full. They are full. They cannot take any more patients. The ITU at Sheffield is 33% of COVID patients. So the ITU's full, and 33% of the patients are COVID patients. That is a hugely disproportionate number, given the wide variety of reasons you'd end up on an ITU. And the COVID inpatients, some of them, some of them are going to need ICU within the next week. And there's potentially no ICU bed for them. So, this is a horrific disease with horrific long-term consequences. So
Let me push back a little bit, Rebecca, because on the issue of ICU beds in particular, from what the statistics that I've seen back in March, April, when we had the big sort of peak, as far as I understand, in total UK, and obviously that will vary by region, so it could have been greater, but at the maximum peak of the pandemic, around about 65% of capacity that's where we reached 65, around about that percentage of capacity. At no point were we at 100% of capacity, and that was in the peak. So why would it be different now?
So one of the nuances of capacity, and can I just say to everybody viewing, by the way, I am skeptical about the lockdown, but I'm just putting it out there that I don't believe there's a conspiracy going on here. There is no new world order or anything like that. This is not about Bill Gates. These are governments struggling because they don't understand the science, and the science is barely understood. We are just dealing with pandemic planning now, and these are tried and tested pandemic planning scenarios that they're putting into action.
Yeah, sorry, Rebecca. I've just seen. I wasn't looking at the comments. I've just seen them there. And I think, can I just say, the very reason I have Rebecca on is that she puts her own opinion, and we should all respect each other's opinions, even if we don't agree with each other. I think one of the problems that you get is people not hearing others. So we can hear and we can respectfully disagree. But sorry, Rebecca, please continue. I hadn't seen stuff.
Yeah, I mean, why would our government want a £230 billion debt right now when we're going into Brexit, something that I personally was so desperate to have? That this is not something that anybody would wish upon anybody else. But going back to the point is that the nuance on the occupancy that you've referred to.
Yeah, it was just that point, yeah.
We cannot actually cope with higher than 85% bed occupancy on an ITU. For example, we only have 8,000 ITU beds. Now, an ITU bed is not the physical bed. It's about 8 nurses per ITU bed as well. And over the summer, they have accelerated the training of the junior nurses. But one of the reasons why we were down at 65% was actually we were at nursing capacity, because without testing, so many nurses were at home self-isolating, and so we were really short on the ability to actually man those beds in the early phase of the lockdown. So absolutely, the hospitals were empty, the cancer wards were empty, the general surgical wards were empty, but those nurses are not deployable up into ITU. You can't just redeploy people. ITU is a highly, highly specialist environment, and predominantly, respiratory nursing is a very specialist area. You can't create suddenly highly specialized units just because there's an empty bed. So I'm only pushing back on some of the numbers here, David, because as you know, I'm anti quite a lot of the stuff that's going on. But I think it is important, and it's chilling speaking to my daughter tonight. She's been on night, she's been in emergency department, and she's been admitting COVID patients. Now, she had COVID back in the early days.
Right. Yep.
Thankfully, I'm really relieved about that. And she's admitting people overnight. And she said, in the last week, we have filled our COVID ward capacity. So
it's interesting, Rebecca, and of course we have to respect what your daughter says, someone literally at the front line. One of the problems I've got with this is it's not to do with the medical side of it, it's to do with the political side of it. And I hear what you're saying about Boris and stuff, but let me just flip up two quick slides in succession. Pick up this one. First of all, back in March, Boris, we must work together to flatten the curve. Remember the good old days, 3 weeks to flatten the curve back in March. Boris, yesterday, we need to flatten the curve of the second wave of COVID right now to avoid lockdown. Now, I think you've already answered this because, you know, politicians with degrees in the arts and whatnot are maybe not the people to, they're maybe not the best.
Oh, David's gone again.
Have I come back?
Oh, there you are.
I have ascended again. They're not maybe the best people to cope with the stresses this puts on them. But I mean, I think a lot of people will feel Boris has shot his credibility. But then, Rebecca, Sir Keir Starmer, I see tonight he's calling for a 2 to 3 week lockdown. What do you make of the politicians? Let's talk about them for a few moments.
Well, let's look at the best example we've got, or we've got a couple of good examples actually. We've got the US under Trump.
Yep.
Now they operate a federalized system. So although he stands on a stage and grandstands a particular narrative, in fact, it's down to the individual states to determine which way they're going. Now, despite everything that is said by Biden and Kamala Harris, actually the US death rate is not that high. It's a 330 million population.
Right.
220,000 is not a huge number of deaths. Their rates per million population are actually better than ours. So the USA is not doing worse than anybody else. And all Donald Trump has said is get on with it. Okay,
Yep.
This is a virus. The vaccines might not work. Pharmacology might be the one to come to the rescue first. He has tried to run a positive narrative as a politician all the way through. He backs off onto Dr. Fauci all the time, who's a hugely popular figure, and he makes it look as though Fauci is dictating policy. But in fact, Trump is saying to the Democrat governors, get your states up and running because some people are going to die. He doesn't say that, but we've got to get on. We've got to learn to live with this disease. Now, he's treated as a lunatic and a heretic by some sections of the US public for saying that. Let's move over to this side of the Atlantic and you listen to what Angus Tegnell from Sweden says. And the Swedish government policy has been to allow their epidemiologists, their scientists, to run the show. We had a terrible, terrible April, May, and June of this year because of the Scandinavian countries, they did the worst. Of the European countries, they've actually done very well because they let that Gompert curve of the epidemic, they allowed that to happen. And now they are enjoying their lockdown-free society because they've got this herd immunity.
Yep.
They also did shield the vulnerable and their elderly. Their social structure is slightly different to ours, but by and large, the scientists running Sweden have done it right.
Yep.
But, and this is where I'm going to stand up for Boris. If our scientists had run the show, we would be in lockdown right now.
Yes,
they have made it very clear. A month ago, they wanted us in lockdown then, and they said it's a circuit breaker. And Boris said no, because now Rishi Sunak is starting to shout. And I think he's saying, I'm not failing businesses out anymore. Hancock and Gove are all for big lockdown. Whitty's for lockdown. Van Tam is for lockdown. Valence less so. Sage, by and large, is saying circuit break. Boris has said, no, we're not circuit breaking because he's not, I don't know if you know, Rishi Sunak sat with him in Parliament last night, not Hancock, not Gove. It was Rishi Sunak, as he and Rishi now are, I think, coordinating the economic response and the wider impacts. So be glad that our scientists, given that we were the best prepared country in the Western world for pandemic response, Britain was the best prepared. So be glad our scientists aren't. controlling it the way the Swedish scientists are.
Yeah, Rebecca, and that's why I love to have you on the stream, because those are that is, folks, you can't argue with what you've just heard. If our scientists were running the show, we would all be locked down, and the pressure, I think, becomes almost unbearable on politicians to go against them. If you go against the so-called science, the media absolutely demonize you, and it comes across as, you are being irrational and you're a heretic. And so, and I see it here locally at Northern Ireland, where I see, in actual fact, Rebecca, we're in a worse position. We've got our Minister of Health is a renowned sheep farmer. Not kidding. That's what his qualification is. He's a sheep farmer, so not a great intellect. So he does exactly what his scientific advisors tell him. So the point you make about Boris, which I've not heard actually recently, is a good point. I think it's small. I think the other expression comes to mind is be thankful for small mercies. But
yeah.
But you mentioned Rishi as well. Like, these circuit breakers, it's just a euphemism for a lockdown. The economic consequence is still going to be pretty devastating, isn't it? What's going to happen? We see Sturgeon's locked down the Central Belt in Scotland. We see now Merseyside basically going under the same. What do you think is going to happen economically in those zones? And how can people cope, or will they be able to cope, do you think?
Well, it is worth saying that Liverpool's rate of increase is 10 times greater than the average of the rest of the country. Now, it's probably 100 times bigger than the average rate of increase in my part of the country, but as an average, it's 10 times greater. So that means that although a tiny percentage of people die from COVID, there are going to be statistically 10 times more people in hospital. So, as I said, my daughter's hospital, the COVID ward is now full, and we're only at the beginning of the curve going up again. So where are we going to be in a week's time? Are they going to be shipping patients out of Sheffield further south, say to Birmingham or Nottingham, for example? What happens then when Birmingham starts to accelerate, if it does? We have a major, major health crisis on our hands. The media is not helping at all. The media is actively acting against the interests of this country, and I'm very, very strongly critical. And I see that your viewers just said I live in Bootle, and I haven't seen or heard of anybody. My daughter's had it, so I have seen somebody very close to me suffer from COVID. It is not a nice disease at all. We saw what happened to our Prime Minister. The reason you haven't, by and large, seen anybody is because statistically it's still actually quite small. The numbers are still quite small. Only 500,000 people in the country have had a positive test. Only 500,000. It's not that many.
Yeah, but I do think we also have to zero in on, I want to come to the media in a second. I want to come back to talk about the media. And we have talked about them before, but I want to talk about that. But just on
Can I just answer Salty Dog? Yeah, how many beds are in that COVID ward?
Yeah.
There are 60 beds, and they filled them in the last week and a half, 10 days. They were empty 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So that's the answer, 60 beds in one hospital in Sheffield. And the ITU is 30 beds, ITU, serving the whole of that particular hospital, of which 30% are taken up by COVID patients. So that's 10 ITU beds.
But you see, when we talk about COVID patients and people who have tested positive with COVID, one of my issues in this is that, and I've still not been able to really get the figure, there's a complete ignoring of the false positive percentage, which to me is unscientific. Because if we don't understand how many people have falsely tested positive, then we can't ascertain the number who have actually tested positive. So I find that, very problematical, Rebecca, and I don't understand why no one seems to want to deal with that. But even leave that to one side. But I don't think we should, because I think it's a big percentage of the.
Well, I think that is a very, very relevant point, because people will be quite surprised to know that we are not regularly testing our healthcare workers. Yet I could contact track and trace now, and I could simulate symptoms and get myself a COVID test. There are plenty of people, because it's bloody free, people are taking the mickey out of the system and having multiple COVID tests, largely because they've been driven insane into panic by the media. And so people are abusing the system. 25% of every single day's case tally of positives, 25% of them are acquired in hospital. We need to test hospital workers every single week, and we're not. And so we have a staffing crisis because we're not testing all of them. They're going home and isolating when they haven't got the bug.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Back to work and test them to keep away from work so they don't infect already ill patients who've gone in with, say, appendicitis. They end up with COVID.
Well, this is part of the dysfunctionality of the NHS, because you're dead right, Rebecca. In one of my local hospital, in fact, the nearest NHS hospital to me, which is quite a big one, I believe a couple of hundred, it's a big number, a couple of hundred members of staff are self-isolating. Not because they've got it, but because of this, they walk past somebody who tested positive or who sneezed or whatever, and so therefore they're off for 2 weeks. So this is where the inherent dysfunctionality of the NHS, which we and I have talked about before, becomes so manifest. And it's so scary because we're now in autumn. We are in the season of flus and colds and viruses, and that includes the COVID virus as well. So the NHS will be undoubtedly stretched, and I see some of the comments here, but folks, the reality is that the NHS is always stretched in the autumn. If there was no COVID, it would be stressed. So come on, that's the reality of it.
Actually, if there was an argument for lockdown, they should have locked down now, but not in March, actually, because we know that now the influenza season starts. Yeah. That's not a secret. What the politicians should have said to the scientists was, why don't we do what Sweden's doing right now? It's summer. We're all going to be out. We had a wonderfully warm spring anyway. Let's just wait off here a little bit. And to avoid a second spike, let's not lock down now, or be a bit smarter about how you titrate lockdown with bed capacity. But we didn't. It was just a mass lockdown on everybody. And it did suppress the virus, by the way. It worked.
It did, but then the virus came back, and it
always will.
Of course, and that's exactly the point, Rebecca. Most sensible people seem to. I heard Julia Hartley Brewer ask the very valid question. So if we impose another 2 week, 4 week, 6 week, whatever it is, you suppress the virus during that period. Then when you lift it, the virus comes back. Because that's what viruses do. The virus doesn't know that it's not supposed to come back. It's still circulating. And I actually believe one of the worst things that this government has done on scientific advice was to put us in masks during the summer months. The summer months when the virus load was at its lowest, when we could have built a degree of immunity. Instead, we were masked up, so that didn't happen. And now we're teetering into the autumn. And, it's a very dangerous time. And, it's so problematical. But the media, I wanted to talk to you about the media. The media has been deplorable from the beginning, way back in March. They've been awful. And I saw them yesterday with the Prime Minister doing their usual routine, the Beth Rigbys of this world, the Laura Kuenssbergs, all the usual suspects. And, nothing's changed. It's still a kind of gotcha game with Boris. And they seem to want even stricter. I think they're probably on the side of Keir Starmer. They want us locked down even harder. So why do you think they behave like that?
again, the media is populated by people who don't have a science background. They've never been in a hospital. They've never been in a nurse's uniform. They don't understand doctors. They just want a gotcha. And they cannot ever put to either the scientists or the PM or whichever minister is presenting the briefing, not one of them ever puts an alternative scenario to them and says, well, how about?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, you're right.
I haven't heard anybody say, how about we do the Swedish model? Because they fundamentally do not understand. They fundamentally do not understand the false positive rate. They think the false positive rate is false positive tests. It's not. The false positive rate is anywhere between 0.7 and 1.3% of all tests. And seeing that up to 20 million now, that's a hell of a lot of tests that are false positives. It's not the number of positive tests that have a false positive rate. It's the total number of tests. But none of the media understand it. So they can't put your viewers' points, which are all valid. I'm watching the stream that everybody's making a valid point. They're not putting valid points to the scientists. They're putting stupid, repetitive, gotcha. I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I'm just going to repeat something I read on Twitter. You know, they don't understand what they're asking about. So what is the point of having them? What is the point?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, the only thing is, I think that the government, I don't know, I think this is a very media-obsessed government, unfortunately, Rebecca. Maybe they all are. But this government should not think that the media will ever be its friend, because it won't. And so you've seen the media do gotcha all the way through the COVID pandemic. And now, as we enter this difficult time for the country, the nation, it's just reverted to type. It's going through the same routine, only this time, Keir Starmer, they seem to be pretty much pushing what he wants, which is interestingly what your friend, Sir Ed Davey, from your Question Time appearance back last year, I see Davey has also rolled in beside, let's have a complete lockdown like Sir Keir wants, and what
like
some
Sturgeon. Like Sturgeon.
Sturgeon, yeah.
So actually, you know, I hope that people are going to see now that Boris is actually fighting our corner, because if you allowed the scientists to do, bearing in mind that scientists exist in a fairly airtight bubble in their own world, you know, and given the sort of an ability to do something at its intellectually purest way, the scientists are advising in that direction, or whichever side of the science argument you take. Both are valid, by the way. But Boris has pushed back on the scientists. Well, actually, if Keir Starmer followed the scientists, which we did earlier on in the year, more cancer patients would die, more businesses would go to the wall, and more to the point, the thing that nobody ever talks about is my grandchildren and their children will be paying for this. We've only just finished paying for the Second World War.
Right, that's right, yeah. I mean,
this is far bigger.
Well, the figure I saw, Rebecca, today, which made me stop and think, was during the years of austerity, of which I approved more or less in some regards, the Conservative government saved about 30 billion between all the various forms of expenditure related to COVID so far. It's going to cost about 300 billion. So there does come a point where you just can't continue with you know, people say it's a choice between health and wealth. I think that's the wrong way of looking at it. It's a balance between health and wealth. If we don't generate taxes, Rebecca, we can't pay for the NHS. We can't pay for, you know, the doctors, the nurses. We can't pay for the stuff that costs 130 billion up until this year per year. So we can't just shut down. It's why do people talk so stupidly in that way?
We're not facing a humanitarian crisis in Britain or
No.
Europe or America or Canada. Africa is facing a humanitarian crisis. I mean, that they are going to be suffering the poverty of the global pandemic far sooner than anybody in Britain. You're not going to be able to afford your first world luxuries, and that is terrible to say that, because people who are the poorest, actually, their luxuries are the hardest fought for. But we can't keep spending money, and but that's what Labour is really doing.
Yeah.
Is Keir Starmer, and you've seen it on Twitter happen over the last few days. The governors of these northern towns, and I'll exclude Andy Burnham because I do think he's quite a legit mayor. I think he's quite a legit politician, but some of the others that are not.
Like the Liverpool mayor, that rabid, foaming at the mouth socialist who demanded that the government take intense action and now cries about it. I think I saw a tweet from you. They're playing politics, aren't they, Rebecca?
They are. It's absolutely outrageous, because actually what they're saying is, we want you to shut us down so that we can then have reparation for the shutdown. We don't want a curfew. We want to be told to shut down properly, which is exactly what the pubs said back in March. Don't restrict us, shut us down so we can claim compensation. They expect the state to bail them out every single time. These are private companies. They're not giving us all their profits as taxpayers, but then, when things hit the wall, suddenly they want taxpayer money, even though they're not prepared to contribute to it when they're doing well. So Keir Starmer has finally shown his colours, and he is a craven animal for the way he is politicising this in the new blue wall seats. It is utterly craven the way they are behaving, and they're demanding lockdown, not because they're worried about the health consequences. They want a full lockdown so that their electorate will get money from the taxpayer. They don't want a 10 p.m. curfew. They want a shut pub. Don't be under any doubt that that is what the Labour Party wants. That is their policy. Trash the economy. Trash the health service, and then blame Boris Johnson. That's what they're up to. It's disgusting.
Yeah, that's been apparent over in recent times. In particular, the Labour under Starmer have moved towards this triangulating situation, which is really, I mean, again, it's got nothing to do with freedom and liberty and all of these things that do matter. It's all to do with trying to kneecap Johnson and his administration and cause more economic chaos. And I mean, I heard someone saying, well, when it comes to, for example, the end of this month, when the furlough comes to an end, but Rishi's got a new scheme which pays 2/3, I think, roughly, of those people who can't work. Although I've got an issue with that, Rebecca, and my issue is a business-like reason. Paying 2/3 of somebody's wage is one thing, but if a business isn't making profit, and profit is the raison d'etre for business to exist, you're kind of missing the point here. And if you go into a 3-month or something, a long lockdown, then you're just paying zombie wages. You are denying, which is what Sturgeon's doing in Scotland. She's wiped out tourism and hospitality for 3.5 million Scots. And I don't even know how that's going to work up there, because
it demands money from central government.
Westminster.
She's not a tax-raising autonomous region. She's a tax spender, but she's not a tax raiser. She gets English money to support.
Can I just say hello to my friend Anne Travers, a fellow Northern Irish person or living in Northern Ireland. Anne, you're very welcome in the stream. Thanks for joining us. And we do need to live alongside it. I'm glad to see that you accept that complete shutdown will be a disaster. Actually, Anne and Rebecca, one of the other points about a complete shutdown, and this is something that I've been contacted by by people I know whose mental health and whose mental well-being has been affected. I mean, some of us are lucky because, I mean, if you live alone, if you're on your own, this can be very, very bad, Rebecca. And it increases isolation, which leads to, to depression, which can lead to other things. And that's a consequence, which again, I don't hear too many of the political class or media prepared to speak up on behalf of those people. So I know.
Can you imagine? I mean, somebody said to me, well, you're going to be on your own for a week. I think, well, okay, then I'll get bored of myself. In March, if you were a single person, maybe just divorced or separated or bereaved, if somebody said to you in March, you're going to have 12 weeks, which we were told, locked on your own, in your own property, you're not allowed to do anything. I personally could not have coped with that. I just couldn't have done it. And I really, really feel for people, because that daily grind of getting up, like, why am I getting up? What am I getting up for? I don't want breakfast, so I'll just stay in bed till lunch. I might go out because it's a bit sunny. I haven't got a garden. If you're in Scotland, you weren't allowed out. It would have taken a terrible, terrible toll on people.
Yeah.
And again, this is why we've got, thank God we haven't got Keir Starmer or Jeremy Corbyn or actually Michael Gove, because they would have us completely locked down the way the scientists are suggesting. Thank God we've got Boris and Rishi saying, hold fire. We've got other things to consider here, not just COVID.
Here's a question for you from the friends of Katie Hopkins, whoever they may be. So, Rebecca, what do you think of students complaining of being in isolation when they've been largely spreading the virus? Now, I've got an opinion in that, but you first.
I personally think that the way those trash landlords that call themselves universities have behaved has been disgusting. I think they conned those students, which is a bumper year, by the way, for all the students that would never have got to university did.
Exams,
a bumper year for those landlords, and they conned them into going to university. Frankly, you've asked the question, I'll put it out there. I'd have let them all get COVID in the first 2 weeks of term or the 3 weeks of term. They're testing positive, but they're not symptomatic. Right. But I categorically do not blame them. I don't blame them. They've had a crap summer. They've had a crap last year at school. Really, they have been affected worse than any generation. There is no way I'm pointing the finger at 18-year-olds. Have a party, all get the sodding virus, because you're not going to kill your granny, but you will kill her if you get it at Christmas and give it to her on Christmas Day. If you get it now, you're not going to kill your granny when you go home at Christmas. I personally think herd immunity starts in that generation. So if I was in charge of planning, I would not have any COVID tests for people under the age of 25 or 30 even. They wouldn't get tested by me unless they were healthcare workers. I would not allow them to be tested.
No.
They can. Not a single one has died. They mostly are asymptomatic. I wouldn't give a damn about students. I'd let it rip through them.
Well, I simply second that emotion. I completely agree with you, Rebecca. I think the way they're being treated is awful. I think I said this the last time we were in the stream, but in my old university, one of the halls was one of the student union halls was put in lockdown. And the university were charging the kids, I think it was 250 quid for a fortnight for food parcels. I mean, this is This is criminal. Honest to God, this is criminal racketeering. And furthermore, you know, I think young people should get on with being young people. They've got their life to lead. And I completely echo and agree with what you say. I mean, we all want to be sensible. But listen, in that age group, I mean, they should just be allowed to get on with it.
Well, they've been recruiting sergeants for the Tory party because they have now shown what these super left-wing policies are, these super authoritarian, state-driven Marxist policies where you just, without question, imprison people against the law in a university accommodation. It's against the law what they did. Nobody was confined to their homes in the way the students were. And you're the left-wing governments, Sturgeon, your lot up in Northern Ireland, you know, half of it's Sinn Féin. You know, Keir Starmer, lock him up. It's
we live in a world, Rebecca, where the people of the left have gone full on authoritarian, and that actually is a point someone made earlier. It means that the government's not being properly held to account, which I think all governments should be. There should be effective opposition that actually opposes them. What we have is an opposition which agrees with them but wants to go a bit further in one direction or the other. That's pathetic, and that's hopeless. Anyway, we have gone massively over time, but it's such an interesting topic that unfortunately we could probably spend a whole hour on it. We've got the last 15 minutes. I wanted to talk.
One thing. National Union of Students, where are they? Where are they? Why aren't they on strike for the students? Why aren't they out there? What are they doing? They're rewriting the curricula and they are decolonizing every single, academic curriculum. It's decolonizing it, not out there representing the students imprisoned in their rooms. Enough said. Rant over.
Yeah, okay, no, that's a fair point. NUS missing in action. Where's the comrades when you need them?
Exactly.
Rebecca, I've got a few more slides I want to flip up. I wanted to talk about this story. Some folks may be aware of this. It was in the news a couple of days back that the Metropolitan Police have launched an investigation into Darren Grimes, who's a young journalist from the Northeast, with regard to his so-called controversial David Starkey interview. The David Starkey interview, by the way, just flick that up. This happened back in June when, during an interview with Grimes, he made a couple of comments which, were seen to be inflammatory. As a consequence of those comments, Professor Starkey pretty much lost, Rebecca, just about every position he's had. He lost his career. Kind of quite sad because, Professor Starkey, to my mind, is someone who has a very erudite historian who's contributed to popular culture in terms of history and all of that. But on this one here, this is what I wanted to ask you. First of all, do you think the Metropolitan Police are right to investigate this as a potential hate crime? That's the first question. What say you?
Yes. No, I don't. I don't.
Okay, that's the end of the stream, folks. Thanks very much for being here. Rebecca has to go.
I was chatting to one of my legal colleagues at the Free Speech Union about this yesterday. So obviously we're involved with it.
Yeah.
And, we were discussing what the motivation is for this. I mean, of course, the Mayor of London is a highly influential person in decisions of the Met Police. And my view is that it has come from him. It really is. Look, it just goes without saying that if I publish, which I think this is the offence that they're getting at, if I publish something that has the words "so many damn blacks," and I'll come on to that in a sec, but if I just publish those words that on the face of it, so many damn blacks, I mean, there's a local Tory councillor who said they're breeding like flies in relation to Muslims in the UK. Is that racist? Well, on the face of it, it's an uncomfortable thing to say, and so possibly yes. But is the publisher, if it's in quotes, David Starkey said so many damn blacks, is that racist? Well, it's speaking fact, it's speaking to fact. And I know this is something that, you know, you dealt with about a month ago now. I'm only speaking to fact. And what Darren Grimes did by publishing those words was he was speaking to the fact of what was said, not the fact contained within them.
Yeah.
So does a publisher automatically endorse the words if they're published? I don't think they do. And the Free Speech Union doesn't think they do. And the criminal barrister involved in Darren Grimes's case has basically said, there's no case here. You haven't got a case. And, you know, if Darren Grimes was my client, I'd say go into the interview and say no comment. What's your question, sunshine? I'm not answering any questions. You put your evidence to me. And there was a really dodgy piece of research done, which quite often, and I've seen this on quite a few of my cases with the Free Speech Union, some really, really dodgy university department in America wrote a paper on the incidence of hate crimes after things Donald Trump said.
Yeah.
Completely unsubstantiated on the numbers, unsubstantiated on the methodology, unsubstantiated in the conclusions. But quite often, universities have quoted that back at me in the cases I've dealt with over basically the last year with the Free Speech Union. So there's this bit of junk science about incitement to racial violence. And so that's the legal hook. But, you know, Darren Grimes just has to say, well, what exactly is the evidence on which you're interviewing me? Arguably, he doesn't even have, he's been invited at a voluntary interview.
Under caution, though, as far as I understand.
I would make them arrest me. That's what I would do. I would say stuff off. And that's my advice to anybody watching this stream. If you get a summons from the police to go and have a chat, tell them to stuff it. You can arrest me. Bring your evidence.
I think the thing that concerns me in this one, Rebecca, is the fact that were this to be a successful prosecution, which I sincerely hope that it's not, but were it to be the case, then it creates this strange, again, further Orwellian world whereby in any conversation, like we're having a live conversation, it's not recorded, it's not rehearsed, anything that another person says, then the person who's interviewing them becomes liable for, which actually brings journalism pretty much to an end, because everything then has to be completely sanitized. And
Charlie,
you know, there's no more free speech. And so with regard to Starkey, I mean, I admire of David Starkey. I think he expressed words clumsily, but we've all done that. Anyone who does live stuff knows that because it's not scripted and every word is not parsed, it's not like a written correspondence, then you can stumble over things, Rebecca. You say things and maybe afterwards you cringe and you think, oh gosh, I wish I hadn't said that. But that's live.
The context. And this is what I didn't get with David Starkey, because he basically rolled over onto his back and told him to stab him.
He did.
Because what the context of what he was saying was, if it was a genocide, they'd all be dead. If it was like a Hutu and Tutsi genocide as happened in Rwanda, like the Tutsis, they'd have been exterminated, which is what happened. So they haven't suffered a genocide.
No.
That's too big a word. They're so damn, and that's David Starkey's style. He says things like damn and botheration. He's very emphatic in his speech.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
And he's saying, well, there wouldn't be so damn many of them if there was a genocide. Honestly, that's what I thought he said, because I did see the interview, and I didn't even blink when he said it, because I saw it in the context of, don't be ridiculous. That's not what genocide is. Because he's a pedant about language as well.
He is. He absolutely is. Yeah. Yeah.
Not what genocide is. Genocide is when you wipe somebody out completely. You ethnically cleanse them. Go to Bosnia to look at ethnic cleansing, or China to look at the Uyghur Muslims. That's what cleansing is. There are so many of them, they can't have had a genocide.
But the thing is,
himself.
But the thing is that things are taken out of context is no longer relevant. I also remember listening to the interview. It was a very pleasant interview between Darren and Starkey. They were getting on well. It was a friendly chat. Starkey used those couple of lines. But the thing I find most bizarre is, while Starkey, yes, he did subsequently apologize, roll over, but that was the end of his career. It's Grimes that they're going after. But it wasn't Grimes that said the things that Starkey said. Yeah, well, why is Grimes being held responsible for Starkey's words?
Okay, so I can just sort of relate this to the criminal law on indecent images. Even though you haven't created the image and taken the photograph of the child in a sexual position, the fact that you look at it and download it means you've effectively created it. So on a par with that, what Darren Grimes has done is he has published racist material, as I understand it. I mean, I think, it was probably a live stream when he did it, and then it was published onto YouTube or whatever, and not taken down. So I think that is the legal hook on it. Well, what really does disturb me, though, is former chiefs of police, Priti Patel, other senior ministers and MPs have spoken out about this. Many commentators, Trevor Phillips, or all the big names have spoken out. One person stands up and says, no, you got to prosecute Keir Starmer.
This guy?
Yeah, him.
Good timing that, Rebecca. Almost like we rehearsed that, and we didn't. Yeah, Starmer, I saw that. Disgusting. Yeah. Yeah, this is the man who wants to lead our country, who would completely bury free speech, actually. But yeah, I think it's very disturbing. Also, Rebecca, you would have thought the Met had other more pressing priorities. You would have thought that, but evidently not.
But David, you don't seem to understand that Darren Grimes isn't carrying a machete or a gun that is going to inflict a wound on a police officer when he goes in for his interview. He'll turn up looking very pretty, as he always does, and be perfectly polite and just say no comment, F off. Whereas the Met now have to wear stab vests because they're likely to die for most of their life. So, if you were a Met officer, you'd be putting your hand up for this one, wouldn't you? You'd be saying, yeah, can I do the Darren Grimes case? Because I don't fancy going and breaking up that rave in Brixton. Thank you very much. So they are probably terrified of policing London, because you know what? I would be. And this is why you get thugs in the police, is because it's only the thugs that will actually now do the job of confronting people who've probably got a knife. Yeah.
But I do think it's sad that I think Darren is only about 22 or something. He's very, and I think we should be encouraged. I would like to encourage young people to go into investigative journalism. And, I think that's a really worthy thing to do. And this is like scaring people off, because if you start to do stuff, then you could end up, as you say, and having to explain yourself to the police. So someone says he's 27. Is he 27? I thought he was 22. I still
28. But you know,
no,
the thing about this is that we've had this stranglehold of BBC, ITV, Channel 4. They're all Oxbridge educated, and you know, they're quite privileged people. Darren Grimes is, you know, first in his family to go to university, really bright. He's like leading the charge for younger people to be, you know, liberal conservative commentators on the platforms that young people populate. You know, it's terrible that somebody like him would be silenced in this way, but that is what the Islington set that Keir Starmer appeals to, that's what they want. But the Red Wallers, they're not interested in Keir Starmer doing that. The Red Wallers are our people, the people who listen to us. We are the people that Keir Starmer needs to get back. And he's not going to get them back by doing this. He's only going to appeal to the ones he's already got.
No, the only back he's going to get is people's back up. But that said, Rebecca, time has once again beaten us. We've gone past the witching hour. So I, of course, would first of all want to thank you very much. Hashtag happy birthday, Rebecca, to you.
That's happy birthday, COVID. It's
COVID.
exactly a year since it was first reported.
Is it?
Yeah, and I have to say, COVID's parents have done a great job.
Good old China. Good old China. Yep. Never talked about, our journalist class never talk about the origins of COVID. It's not interesting. Yeah. Thing is, Rebecca, because you are the queen of hashtags, I have no idea what half of them mean, but of course, I should get you to explain them up front. But listen, thanks for being here with me. It's always a pleasure with you. Thank you all. Thank you very much, everybody on the stream. Thanks for all your comments. I think I accidentally muted someone. I will fix that so the person can return to the stream. Hope you enjoyed that, folks. Hope you enjoyed our conversations. And so without any further ado, it's good night from me.
And it's goodbye to everybody from me. And it's lovely to see you all again.